right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakadash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers, and peace and blessings and salutation to the hopeful elect out there pushing his word and truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakadash. Pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful elect, the believers, the listeners whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashem Al Shai. And what I want to go into, all right, this morning, as we know, we're in the feast, all right, of unleavened bread. All right, we just had the Passover, which, Lord will, as we always say, there will be a need for no other Passover, man. In a way things are happening, quickly, prophecy, has sped up, going into the Passover. The Lord has caused major events, okay, to happen prophetically, okay, as we understand the Passover is, all right, a remembrance of the Lord having mercy, okay, on his people and punishing, all right, their oppressors, man, okay, and we're in the time now when the Lord is getting ready to have mercy, okay, upon the remnant of his people and punish their oppressors, man, which is the second Exodus, man. So Lord will, we're closer than we believe to the second Exodus, man. All right, in which the Lord is going to perfect, okay, a remnant of his people, all right, and avenge us of our enemies, man, which our number one enemy is Esau, Edom, okay, but along with all these other nations, man, because Esau has a world system of wickedness, all right, that he set up in the planet Earth, man. And that's why Yahweh Shai is coming with great power to go to war, all right, with the nations of the earth, beginning with our number one oppressor, Esau, Edom. Okay, so going into the Passover, and then you have what we call the feast of unleavened bread. Okay, in which you remove your the yeast products from your house, okay, and it's a time of feasting, celebrating the Lord's, all right, victory, man, okay, victory over our enemies, man, you see, and the number one enemy, all right, in the truth beyond externally is Esau, but internally it's our old man. Okay, and that's what the emphasis of the feast of unleavened, bread, should be upon the old man. Now, of course, we do our due diligence, and we, of course, as a body, it's always going to be someone that finds something new that's a yeast product that we didn't know, you know. So, of course, by default, we're going to get better and better, okay, in keeping, all right, the practical aspect of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, you know. But we don't, but the thing is, just to add balance to it, all right, because it's we're serious when it comes to the practicalities, okay, of, certain feasts, to the best of our ability, okay. So, we do our due diligence, okay, but we don't want that to overshadow the spiritual aspect of us purging out the old man, okay. We don't want, to make the practicalities be the main thing, of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, all right, because that's the purpose of grace. We don't abuse grace and just, be be nonchalant about the practicalities of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, okay? But we want to be careful to make the practicalities, okay, the theme, okay, the main thing, you see, and miss out on the spiritual aspect, because we're in a time where we have to have spiritual awareness, man, of ourself first and foremost. Spiritual awareness starts within, then it begins without. Okay? So when you go here, just to get some context on this, is 1 Corinthians chapter 5, In verse I started at 6. It says, your glorying is not good. Know ye not that a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump? Now this is the church of Corinth, which we have to understand. Corinth was a proud church. You know, it was a city of commerce. Okay, it was a city of status. Okay, you had certain members, all right, that was of a higher class than other members of the church. Okay, you had a lot of sexual immorality. So Apostle Paul, like, y'all glorying, but y'all wilding out. You know, y'all glorying and boasting as y'all got it figured out, but y'all wilding. Because one thing too, uh, 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 keeping, you know, because we can get caught up in this thing of trying to keep the practicality to the T, you know, that we forget, okay, that it's about purging the old man. And we can find ourselves trying to glory in the practicalities of, all right, the feast week, okay, and not the spiritual aspect of it, okay, the work that need to be done with us eternally, man, because we're all a work in progress until we're perfected at the coming of Yahweh, okay. So you keep reading. It said, purge out therefore the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened. For even Hamashiach is sacrificed for us. And you read this in the NLT. It says, get rid of the old yeast by removing the wicked person from among you. Now, this was talking about an actual Jake who had committed adultery with his father's wife. You know, so Apostle Paul, like, look, purge that nigga from around you. Okay? And then the spirit, that old man, all right, which was a spiritual fornicator, we're always purging and getting rid of that nigga, man. You know, because that nigga was cultivating pride, okay, worldly ambition, you see, rebellion against Yahweh Bashemal Shai, selfish as hell. Okay, those are the things that that we should put emphasis on when we think about purging and removing things. Okay, which goes beyond the practical, because everything in the practical, when you go into the law, it's a foreshadow of something spiritual. Okay, and like I say, we do our diligence to be on point as we can. Okay, in the practical aspect. Okay, we don't neglect that. Okay, we do our due diligence from that aspect as well. Okay, but the main work is removing that old man from amongst us, man. That old nigga that's still a part of us, man. You know, and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, it exposes, you know, one thing about it, during this time of the Passover, it causes, you know, wickedness, okay, amongst the body to come up. You know, a lot of brothers, former brothers are removed during this time, man. And that's the Lord removing and purging out men from amongst the body, okay? Because they've not purged the old man. Now they have to be purged from the body because they couldn't purge their old man, okay? And the brothers that remain, all right, the Lord is putting emphasis on us to purge out the old man. Look at, examining ourselves and seeing them old tendencies and be like, wait, that got to go. I got to cut that out completely. Okay? Certain strengths we thought we was on point, the Lord show us, okay, I'm not as on point as I thought. I need to address this. Okay? And it comes with what? Repetition. Purging the old man ain't a ritual. Okay? And then, this nigga Lee, no, it's a spiritual awareness to be conscious of that old man, okay, and to react different, okay, to think different, to move different in the moment, mastering the moment. Okay, we purge the old men by mastering the moment, okay, those old tendencies, man, conquering those old tendencies in the moment, in the actual moment, being conscious of it, man, through what? Self-examination, you see, because like I say, we can spend so much time, all right, in the practical, you can look at the look at the black paint on the dumbbell. Okay, and if you go through the rabbit hole of all these different chemicals that's on the dumbbell, is it go to yeast? You like, damn. Okay, you see. So like I say, once we do our due diligence, we don't go crazy and go overboard with the practical. We do due diligence, but we don't want to spend the whole time Googling, all right, every item, okay, in the house, okay, mainly the food, of course the food, but you can get into, just like I say, simple things, man. The carpet, you look at, you see, what's in carpet, okay? You find out, go through the rabbit hole of chemicals and like, damn, if she's in the carpet, you're going to remove your carpet. You see? That's where we have grace, and we're going to get into that aspect of it is the grace. Okay? But what we can work on is that pride that's in us that has to be addressed. Okay? Selfishness that's in us that has to be addressed. Okay? That old man way of thinking, those worldly ambitions that still can be in us that have to be addressed, and so forth and so on. That's what the emphasis on. Okay? So when you keep reading, it says, get rid of the old yeast by removing this wicked person from among you. Then you will be like a fresh batch of dough made without yeast, which is what you really are. Yahweh Shah Hamashiach, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed for us, man. So we want to remove, all right, that old man. The emphasis is on the old man. That's what's being purged. Because you go into purge, it goes to what? To thoroughly cleanse. Okay? And how we're cleansing ourselves of that old man by applying the word. Applying the word in our day to day, that's the purging aspect. That's what's cleansing us, man. As we remove things out of our house, we physically remove, okay, things out of our houses. Well, there's things that need to be moved out of our spirit. Okay? You see, that should be what we're doing in the practical, should be a symbolic for what we're doing in the spirit. Okay? Examining, because how do you find, what's the yeast? Well, you have to examine. You have to examine these products, these food products, and you examine different things, and then you recognize, oh, this yeast, remove it. Well, we gotta do the same process in our spirit. Like, oh, as we apply the scriptures, as we apply the word, as we live this thing real time, we should be examining, okay, reflecting on our behavior, reflecting on our mindset, praying, fasting, okay. You see, that's the spirit. That what should be going on spiritually. As we, let's say, practically remove things from our house, we should be, all right, removing things from our spirit. Okay, we should be cleaning out the spirit. This is the time to clean out the spiritual closet. Okay, it says, so let us celebrate the festival not with the old bread of wickedness and evil, but with the new bread of sincerity and truth. Okay, so as we come into, as we're in the feast of unleavened bread, okay, which as you go here, what should be increasing in us is sincerity, and truth. You see, becoming something. We're becoming something, man. All right. And when you go to Galatians, let's go here real quick. Galatians chapter 5. Okay. I'm going to start at verse 1. It says, Galatians 5:1. It says, stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Yahweh Shai have made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. Okay? Because in the book of Galatians, what you had going on, you had what you call Judaizers, all right, that will come, wicked niggas that will come after, the Apostle Paul. As Apostle Paul was teaching and setting up churches, well, these wicked niggas would, when Apostle Paul would leave and go on somewhere else in his journey, in his mission, niggas would come behind him and try to push a doctrine that Jake had to be justified in the law. They push a doctrine, they push emphasis on the law. Okay? which the law itself is not wicked. The law is great. That's the most righteous and spiritual thing, you know, um, that we can apply real time is the law. Okay, but when you try to make it as if you're justified by the law, well, you're Xing out Yahweh and His grace. Okay, we don't abuse grace. We don't, like I say, we're not nonchalant when it comes to the law, when it comes to the practical aspect, okay, of any high holy days, of keeping the Sabbath, of, we're not nonchalant about those things. We rehearse the right. We get better naturally. If you do anything for a period of time and you're, um, doing your due diligence to grow and understand, well, naturally you're going to get better at keeping the law. You're gonna be way better at keeping, all right, the Feast of Unleavened Bread year 3 than year 1. Okay, you're gonna be better at year 8 than you was at year 5. Okay, because it's a thing of repetition. So by default, we're getting better and better at keeping the law as a body, because there's always a brother that's gonna find something that's gonna bring this aspect, gonna bring this perspective, and the body is growing together to where we're naturally, because the whole spirit of the law is for us to just be, okay? And the law is rooted in love. And it's going to get into it, okay? So when you go here, it says, behold, it says, I, Paul, say unto you that if you be circumcised, Yahweh shall profit you nothing. Now, the thing was not that the Apostle Paul was against circumcision, all right? But if you're basing salvation just based off of being actually circumcised, then you're missing the point in Yahweh Shai. Okay? You're missing the whole point. Now you're using the law to void out Yahweh Shai. If you're basing salvation, because circumcision in the spirit is just going into, okay, you think that just by you keeping a certain law so perfect that that's justifying you. Nah, okay? Because it's not about us keeping the law perfect. It's about us appreciating the law and doing what we can in the situation we in, but actually growing the inward man. Because we can be keeping, all right, somebody can keep the Feast of Unleavened Bread better than someone else, okay? But are they changing inwardly? Okay? Are they changing inwardly? You see, we can always go and tick for tack in the law, but is the inward man changing? Okay? So reading on, it says, I read this in NLT, it says, listen, I, Paul, tell you this in Galatians 5:2. If you are counting on circumcision to make you right with the Most High, then Hamashiach will be of no benefit to you. I say it again, if you are trying to find favor with the Most High by being circumcised, you must obey every regulation in the whole law of Moses. And that's the point. Because, I get personal, but hey, brothers, all right, over the years, hey, brothers that went ahead and did that wasn't, just because brothers are teaching, Timothy, all right, he had to, get circumcised, and as an adult male, because he was a teacher, he had an office, okay, so, the actual circumcision, no, it's not wicked, but if you depend on that and you boast in being circumcised, okay, as favor with the Most High, then it becomes off. Because now you're missing the whole point of Yahweh Shai. Okay? And like I say, we don't abuse grace. We don't use the grace of Yahweh Shai, okay, to wild out and do as thou wilt. Okay? That's the Christian doctrine. You see? But we understand we're going to fall short in areas, man. According to the practicalities of the law, there's no way. That's it. And Yahweh Shai, that grace, it makes it to where as we're rehearsing the righteous acts, we don't destroy ourselves when we do fall short. Okay? So we don't destroy ourselves, all right, as we fall short in these things, man. Okay? And it says, but then even when we fall short, all right, through Yahweh Shai grace, we have a chance to, okay, get it right. Because there's certain things that you will be put to death on, you won't have a chance to get better at. Okay, if it wasn't for the grace of Yahweh Shai. Okay, so the failure, all right, to when we fail in the law, as we were rehearsing the righteous act, when we fail in particular, all right, practicalities of the law, well, we're able to make improvements on that because of grace. Because if it wasn't no grace, we wouldn't even have a chance to make an improvement on that. Because certain laws, you out of them. Okay? In certain laws, we will be, uh, continually condemned. Okay? We wouldn't even have a opportunity to make the adjustment and get it right the next time. You know? Certain things that we did in year one, year two of our personal keeping the feast of unleavened bread. I'm just using that as an example because we're in it. Okay, okay, I know better now. I'm not gonna do that next go around. Okay, bam. I think I ain't know. I know now. Okay, boom. Make that adjustment. Okay, because it's all about becoming and getting better. Okay, and spiritually purging out the old man. Okay, it said verse 4 said, "For if you are trying to make yourselves right with the Most High by keeping the law, you have you have been cut off from Hamashiach, you have fallen away from the Most High's grace. But we who live by the Spirit eagerly, all right, wait to receive by faith the righteousness the Most High has promised us, man. Because when we're delivered, the law is going to be in us, it's going to be perfected. Okay, and then Yahweh Shai, he's coming to change the world. This whole system, he coming to replace this whole. Yahweh Shai is coming to purge the earth of wickedness, man. He's gonna cleanse the earth. Okay, you see, to what the system that Yahweh Shai is getting ready to bring to the earth. First, we're going to be changed, and then the earth itself is going to be changed, man. Okay, the earth is going to be law friendly. You see, under Yahweh Shai. All right. Now it's a fight. And then right now there's things that's out of our control. Okay, so we needed a grace period in captivity, not to abuse grace and be nonchalant in the law, no, but to have a grace for where we fall short because it's so much we can't control. Okay, and we can find ourselves, I'm speaking. This is from a a, a place of being in that mindset. Okay, of just putting so much emphasis on the practicalities and not enough on the spirit. Okay, like I said, we gonna get into laws like it because it's the law is beautiful. You know, every day we learn new laws to keep. As we walk in this thing, we learn new laws to keep and new ways to be applied. We add that to our walk. We don't boast in it. Okay. Okay, like I say, you might be in year, all right, 7. This brother in year 2. He's not gonna naturally keep the law and the customs. Okay, he's not gonna keep it as you do. He's growing into that. You see, and that creates also a mind of grace to where you are addressing things according to the law, but you're not destroying a man. Now there's certain things, like goddamn, Jake. You see, certain situation, case by case. Okay, but the overall perspective, okay, is to understand, this brother year 2. Okay, he got to keep growing and leveling up. Okay, so let's go here to the book of Galatians. Let's finish this off. Said, for when we place our faith in Yahweh Shai HaMashiach, there is no benefit in being circumcised or being uncircumcised. What is important is faith expressing itself in love, man. Faith expressing itself in love. And I know this year, more than any year, I've embraced, the love of the brotherhood. Just being around the brothers, man. You see, we're building, iron sharpening iron, the spirit revealing, what we all have to work on, brothers acknowledging it, moving forward. Okay, brothers in the spirit of getting the hell out of here, man. You see? So really embracing, the brotherhood, the body, cherishing that. Okay, because as we keep, the feast, man. Okay, well, it's all rooted in love. What Yahushua did, as he was our Passover during the time of Rome, as he was our Passover lamb in the spirit, he was tortured. Okay, you see, that's why it's a serious, time of year, because Yahushua was tormented. He did that out of love, man. Okay, so we're in a time now, all right, that we really show our faith, through love, man. Okay, the scripts even call what we're doing is a labor of love, man. Brothers teaching, brothers researching, brothers watching. That's a labor of love, man. Okay, fellowshipping, man. That's a labor of love, man. You see, building with brothers, man. That's a labor of love, and putting emphasis on that more than anything. Okay, because guess what? Out of love, you're gonna keep through love. You're gonna keep the laws that you can keep to the best of your ability, man, to a T. You can be perfect in the laws that you can keep to a T. In a little portion, okay? Because out of love, man, the adultery, not even a thought. You got love for your brother, man. Stealing from your brother ain't a thought, man. Okay, bearing false witness on your brother ain't a thought. These are all laws, man. All right, we don't have to read Leviticus and Numbers and Exodus and know not to do that to our brother, man. Okay, not to teach a false doctrine, not to extort them, not to, no, we know not to, out of love, you know. So this is the things that we are to grow in, okay, in the spirit of Yahweh Bashem Al Shai, man. Okay. Okay. It says, I'll read this in verse 7. It says, "You did run well, who did hinder you, that you should not obey the truth. This persuasion cometh not of him that calleth you, which is Yahweh Bashem Al Shai, a little leaven, leaven the whole lump," which that was a false doctrine. Okay, that was mingled, okay, amongst the church of Galatia. Okay, so he like, and that's another thing, doctrine. Doctrine. Like that's why the apostles are very tedious when it comes to the doctrine, man. Because a small portion of false doctrine, man, will mess up the whole doctrine. You see, and that's why, the apostles, all right, the elder apostles, the heads of the camps, okay, they push being thorough, okay, with the information we bring out. Even when we go into the news, man, be thorough, because we can have a little bit of wrong information and it throw off the whole perspective. It throw off the whole, doctrine, man. We can mingle the wrong information within the doctrine as we bringing things out, and it'll throw the doctrine off, man. Okay, so that aspect, that's another thing too. Emphasis on the doctrine, okay, is vital, man. All right, thoroughly combing through particular things to make sure that we on point in the doctrine, man. So that was the point. Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you sisters edified once again. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers. And peace and blessings, salutations to the whole elect. Shalom.